What if I told you there are parts of Canada where you can ditch the rat race, escape the housing crisis, and legally vanish into regions so overlooked that most Canadians couldn't point to them on a map if their Tim Hortons order depended on it? These places have Canadian flags, Canadian healthcare, and zero interest in your career trajectory or your thoughts about real estate. Welcome to Canada's forgotten territories and remote regions, where the cost of living makes sense, the neighbors are scarce, and the only traffic jam involves a beaver dam, a logging truck, and someone who stopped to photograph a moose for social media that won't upload because there's no cell service for the next 100 kilometers. And yes, you can move there right now. Let's get into it before the rest of Canada remembers these places exist beyond election maps and weather warnings. Before we pack our flannel shirts and unresolved feelings about city living, go ahead and smash that like button. Because freedom is beautiful, but algorithmic validation pays the bills in ways self-sufficiency cannot. Let's go. 1. Northern Ontario's far north. Specifically the regions above the 50th parallel, where the towns have names like Moosonee, Ottawa-Piscat, and Fort Severn. Places that sound like they were named by someone who gave up halfway through and just pointed at a map. This isn't cottage country Ontario. This isn't Muskoka with its overpriced lakefront properties and retirees and boats that cost more than your education. This is the Ontario that most Ontarians forget exists. The part that's closer to Hudson Bay than Toronto and operates on a completely different frequency of Canadian life. Moosonee is accessible by train or plane only. There are no roads connecting it to the rest of Ontario, which immediately tells you what kind of commitment we're talking about. It's a town of about 1,500 people on the Moose River, and it's the gateway to James Bay. The landscape is flat, marshy, boreal forest stretching forever, and the kind of sky that makes you understand why people believe in something bigger than themselves. It's remote, yes, but it's also functional. There's a hospital, schools, a northern store where prices make you reconsider every purchase, and a sense of community that comes from shared isolation. The freedom here is logistical. You're far enough from the noise that nobody's regulating your life into obedience. Want to build something? Go ahead, but understand that materials cost more because everything arrives by train or barge. Want to live off-grid? The land supports it, but you better know what you're doing because romanticizing wilderness gets people killed. The Cree communities in this region have lived here for thousands of years, and their knowledge of the land is what keeps people alive when winter hits and the temperature makes you question your ancestors' migration choices. The cost of living is weird. Rent is lower than Southern Ontario by a shocking margin. You can find housing for a fraction of what you'd pay in Toronto or Ottawa. But groceries? Brutal. A jug of milk can cost $12. Fresh produce is a luxury item. You learn to adapt, to buy in bulk when the barge comes in, to hunt and fish if you're capable, or to just accept that your diet will involve more canned goods than you ever thought possible. But your rent is $600 a month instead of $2,500, so you're still ahead financially, even if emotionally you're mourning affordable strawberries. Northern Ontario's far north isn't for everyone. It's isolated, the winters are long and merciless, and if you need constant stimulation or next-day delivery, you'll suffer. But if you want space, real space, and a life where your biggest concern is whether the supply plane is delayed, not whether your landlord is raising rent again, then this forgotten corner of Ontario might be your answer. Just bring bug spray. The black flies here have a personal vendetta against newcomers. 2. Labrador. The part of Newfoundland and Labrador that everyone forgets about, because Newfoundland gets all the attention, with its colorful houses and charming accents and aggressively friendly people who will invite you over for dinner after knowing you for 6 minutes. Labrador is Newfoundland's quiet sibling who moved to the mainland, bought land, and never looked back. It's massive, wild, and so sparsely populated that you could scream your deepest secrets into the woods and the only response would be a caribou looking mildly concerned before continuing its day. Labrador is divided into regions, but let's focus on central and northern Labrador, places like Happy Valley Goose Bay, Churchill Falls, and Nain. Happy Valley Goose Bay is the largest town with about 8,000 people, and it's got everything you need: grocery stores, schools, a hospital, and a Canadian Forces base that keeps the local economy humming along nicely. It's cold, yes, but not absurdly so by Canadian standards. Winter is long, brutal, and will test your relationship with sunlight. But summer is gorgeous, with endless daylight and lakes so clear you can see your regrets reflecting back at you in high definition. The landscape in Labrador is stunning in that rugged, unforgiving way that outdoor brands salivate and city people nervous. There are mountains, fjords, rivers, forests, and the Mealy Mountains, which are being turned into a national park reserve because even the government occasionally acknowledges that some places are too beautiful to ruin with development and Tim Hortons franchises. You can hike, fish, hunt, and camp without seeing another soul for days. It's the kind of freedom that makes you realize how much of your life has been spent in lines, traffic, and crowded spaces where personal boundaries are a polite suggestion that nobody follows. Labrador's cost of living is manageable compared to southern Canada, which is a low bar, but still. Housing is affordable. You can buy a house, an actual house, with rooms and a yard and space to exist for prices that would make Toronto residents weep into their $500,000 condos. Groceries are more expensive because of shipping, but not apocalyptically so. You learn to shop smart, to buy local when possible, and to accept that some things just cost more when you live somewhere beautiful and far from the supply chain's favorite routes and distribution centers. The culture in Labrador is a mix of Indigenous, Innu, and Innu communities, settlers, and people who came for work and stayed because they fell in love with the place or couldn't figure out how to leave, and eventually just accepted their fate. It's unpretentious, hardworking, and refreshingly direct. People don't care about your resume or your LinkedIn endorsements or whatever entrepreneurial journey you're on. They care whether you're willing to help dig out a car stuck in a snowbank or share your tools when someone needs them, which is actual community, not the performative kind you see on social media. Freedom in Labrador looks like this. You wake up to silence, real silence, not the muffled city kind where you can still hear someone's car alarm 3 blocks over or your upstairs neighbor doing CrossFit at 5 a.m. You have land, space to breathe, and a lifestyle where your biggest decision is whether to go fishing or hiking. Not whether you can afford rent next month or if your landlord is going to sell the building and evict everyone to renovate for higher-paying tenants. The government here is smaller, less intrusive, and mostly concerned with keeping infrastructure running and a place where nature actively works against infrastructure like it's got a personal grudge. Labrador isn't for everyone. It's remote, the winters are legitimate and will humble you. And if you need cultural amenities or a variety of dining options beyond Chinese food and pizza, you'll be disappointed. But if you want to live somewhere real, somewhere the land hasn't been paved over and optimized for profit margins and shareholder value, then Labrador is waiting with open arms and a snowmobile you can borrow if yours breaks down, because that's just what people do here. 3. Northern Saskatchewan, specifically the areas north of L'Orange, where the boreal forest takes over and the population thins out faster than your patience in Toronto traffic. We're talking about places like Stony Rapids, Uranium City, and Fond du Lac. Communities that exist in a part of Saskatchewan that most people associate with nothing because they forgot Saskatchewan has a north. Everyone thinks Saskatchewan is just flat prairies and canola fields, but surprise, about half the province is boreal forest, lakes, and rock. And almost nobody lives there, which is exactly the point. This region is accessed mostly by plane or ice roads in winter, because conventional roads are for provinces that don't understand the beauty of seasonal infrastructure. The communities here are small, tight-knit, and primarily Indigenous Dene and Cree, with a smattering of miners, fishermen, and people who looked at Southern living and said, "No thanks, I'd rather fight a winter that actually tries to kill me." It's not easy living, but it's honest living, the kind where you can't fake competence or buy your way out of problems. The lakes here are absurd. Lake Athabasca is massive, so big it stretches into Alberta and makes you feel like you're standing at an ocean. Except the water is fresh and there are pike the size of small children lurking beneath the surface. You can fish until your arms hurt, hunt if you're licensed and capable, and enjoy a level of natural abundance that feels almost unfair compared to places where people pay membership fees to access a stocked pond. If you are seeing this useful hit, subscribe to learn more about these opportunities. Cost of living in northern Saskatchewan is a mixed bag wrapped in a contradictory economic bow. Housing is cheap, sometimes shockingly so. You can rent or buy for prices that urban Canadians would assume are missing a zero. But food? Expensive. Gas? Also expensive. Everything that needs to be flown or trucked in costs more, which is everything. Because northern Saskatchewan doesn't manufacture much besides tough people and scenic views. The trade-off is that you're not hemorrhaging money on rent, so your grocery pain is softened by the fact that you're actually saving money for the first time in your adult life. The lifestyle here is self-sufficient by necessity. You can't DoorDash your way through a blizzard. You can't call a plumber and expect them tomorrow. You learn to fix things, to prepare, to rely on your neighbors who are also learning the same lessons in real time. It builds character, or at least that's what people say when they're trying to make isolation sound romantic. But genuinely, there's something freeing about living somewhere that forces you to be capable, to think ahead, to not depend on systems that may or may not show up when you need them. Freedom in northern Saskatchewan is quiet and vast. It's the kind of place where you can see the northern lights so clearly they look fake, where you can paddle a canoe for hours and not see another person, where the concept of rush hour is absurd because there are 12 cars in town and none of them are in a hurry. You're free from the grind, the expectations, the constant noise of modern life that tells you you're never doing enough. Here, survival is enough, presence is enough, and that's shockingly liberating. Northern Saskatchewan isn't for everyone. It's cold, remote, and the supply chain situation can make you nostalgic for things like grocery store variety and predictable availability of dairy products. But if you want to live free, really free, in a place where the land is bigger than your problems and the sky goes on forever, then this forgotten slice of Canada might be exactly what you didn't know you needed. 4. Yukon, the Gateway Territory, the one people have actually heard of because of the gold rush and a Jack London novel they were assigned in high school but definitely didn't finish. Yukon is rugged, wild, and somehow both intimidating and welcoming at the same time. Like a grizzly bear that knows how to make sourdough bread and will share the recipe if you ask nicely. Whitehorse is the capital and the only place that remotely qualifies as a city. Though calling it a city feels generous when it's got about 30,000 people, which in Yukon terms makes it a bustling metropolis, but anywhere else would be a large town with ambitions. There are restaurants, breweries, and even a Walmart, which locals treat like a cultural landmark. You can get pho, decent coffee, and outdoor gear that will save your life when you inevitably underestimate how cold -40 actually feels. Spoiler, it feels like your face is being personally attacked by the concept of temperature itself, and losing badly. But here's the thing, Whitehorse isn't why you move to Yukon. You move to Yukon for everything outside Whitehorse. The mountains, the rivers, the forest so thick with spruce trees you half expect a fantasy novel to break out or a quest-giver NPC to appear and ask you to collect herbs. You move here because you can buy land for less than a used Toyota, build a cabin, and live off-grid without anyone calling it a phase or suggesting you see a therapist about your commitment issues with society. Yukoners are a special breed. They're the kind of people who fix their own trucks, hunt their own food, and have at least 3 backup generators because the power goes out and nobody panics. They just light a candle, make chili, and continue the conversation like infrastructure is optional. It's a place where self-sufficiency isn't a lifestyle brand you perform on Instagram, it's a requirement for not dying, which keeps things pretty honest. The summers are glorious. 20+ hours of daylight, warm enough to hike in a t-shirt, and wildflowers everywhere like nature decided to throw a party and forgot to clean up afterward. The winters, well, let's just say winter in Yukon is not for the weak or the underprepared, or anyone who thinks a hoodie counts as outerwear. It's dark, it's cold, and it lasts longer than any relationship you've ever had, and with less emotional payoff. But if you can handle it, you're rewarded with northern lights so vivid they look photoshopped, and a kind of silence that makes you realize how much noise you've been drowning in your whole life just to feel normal. And taxes? Yukon has no territorial sales tax, none. You still pay GST because the federal government never forgets to collect, but that's it. Your money goes further here, assuming you're not spending it all on heating oil and the occasional emotional support purchase of something ridiculous from Amazon that takes 3 weeks to arrive and costs $40 in shipping, which you'll pay anyway because isolation makes you irrational. Freedom in Yukon looks like this. You wake up when the sun decides to show up, which could be 4 a.m. or never, depending on the season and your relationship with cosmic randomness. You work if you want, remotely if you can get internet that doesn't freeze along with everything else. You spend your weekends hiking, fishing, or just staring at mountains because they're right there, and honestly, they're more interesting than most people. And when you're ready for civilization, Whitehorse is right there with its Walmart and its one Greek restaurant that everyone agrees is surprisingly good considering. Yukon isn't for everyone. It's remote, it's harsh, and if you hate being alone with your thoughts, this place will destroy you or heal you, probably both in the same afternoon. But if you want to live free, like genuinely free, not Instagram caption free, Yukon delivers. Just bring a good coat. And a better attitude about darkness and your relationship with vitamin D. 5. Northwest Territories, or as locals call it, NWT, because even the name is too long for a place where efficiency matters and syllables are a luxury nobody can afford. If Yukon is Canada's rugged adventurer, NWT is its mysterious loner who lives in a cabin, doesn't own a phone, and somehow always knows when a storm is coming through some ancient knowledge or just really good pattern recognition. NWT is massive. It stretches from the 60th parallel all the way up to the Arctic Ocean, which means parts of it are so far north that north stops being a direction and starts being a state of mind, and possibly a personality disorder. The capital is Yellowknife, a city of about 20,000 people built on bedrock beside Great Slave Lake, which sounds ominous but is actually stunning. Yellowknife is rough around the edges in the best way. It's got dive bars, Vietnamese restaurants that have no business being that good, and a surprising art scene for a place where winter temperatures make you question whether humans were meant to live this far from the equator or if we're all just collectively stubborn. But Yellowknife is just the beginning. NWT is home to countless smaller communities, many of them accessible only by ice road in winter or float plane in summer. Yes, ice roads. Actual frozen highways across lakes that exist for a few months a year and require a level of trust in physics that most people don't possess and shouldn't be asked to develop. If you've ever thought, I'd like my commute to involve prayer and possibly acceptance of mortality, NWT has you covered. The culture here is deeply rooted in indigenous traditions. Dene, Inuit, and Métis communities have lived in these lands for thousands of years, and their knowledge of the land, the animals, and how to survive in conditions that would break most Southerners is unmatched and frankly humbling. If you move here and think you're going to thrive without learning from the people who actually know what they're doing, you're going to have a bad time, possibly a fatal one. Respect the land, respect the people, and maybe don't assume your background in marketing translates to hunting caribou or navigating by stars. NWT offers a kind of freedom that's hard to find anywhere else. You can own land, build what you want within reason, and live a life where your nearest neighbor might be 10 kilometers away, and perfectly happy about that. The government here is smaller, less bureaucratic, and more focused on keeping people alive than regulating what color you paint your shed or whether your fence height complies with community aesthetic standards that nobody voted for. The wildlife situation is next level. We're talking caribou herds that look like something from a nature documentary, hundreds of thousands of animals moving across the tundra like a living carpet with purpose and direction. There are wolves, bears, musk oxen that look like they were designed by a committee that couldn't agree on anything, and enough lakes and rivers to make any fisherman weep with joy, or frustration depending on whether they're catching anything. Now let's address the elephant in the igloo, the cost of living. NWT is not cheap. Because everything has to be flown or trucked in, groceries are expensive. We're talking $20 for orange juice, $30 for a bag of apples that may or may not be fresh, and don't even ask about vegetables unless you want to cry into your iceberg lettuce that cost more than your dinner and possibly your dignity. But here's the trade-off. Wages are higher. Many jobs come with northern allowances, and if you're willing to work in mining, government, or trades, you can make serious money. The kind of money that makes those expensive apples feel less like robbery and more like a lifestyle choice you're making consciously. And taxes? NWT has one of the lowest small business tax rates in Canada and no territorial sales tax, just GST. So while your groceries hurt your soul, your take-home pay hurts less. It's a weird economic balancing act where you're both broke and rich depending on whether you're buying food or looking at your bank account after payday. Winter in NWT is no joke. It's not just cold, it's dark. Yellowknife gets about 4 hours of sunlight in December, and the further north you go, the less sun you see until eventually you're living in what can only be described as a long, cold night that tests your relationship with existence. Some communities experience polar night, which is exactly what it sounds like. Weeks of darkness where the sun doesn't rise and everyone just accepts it like it's a minor scheduling conflict with the cosmos. But then summer hits, and you get the midnight sun, endless daylight, and a level of energy that makes you feel like you can accomplish anything, which you can't, but the vibes are immaculate and that counts for something.